everyone, my name is Isabella Elge. This is my computer literacy class for LibreOffice Writer. This class is to serve as part of the continuation for my gold project, which is a service project that I am doing through the Girl Scouts of America. So again, to start, this is the LibreOffice window here. So the first thing we're going to talk through is opening a new file. So what you can do is you can click Open File, or as you can see, I have recent documents. You can also click Writer Documents. So what we can do is we'll click my example because this works best. But you can also click the Writer document here to launch a new one. And you can also go, if this will launch, give it a minute to load. So as you can see, my document opened greatly. We love it. So if you click File up at the top here, give it a minute to register. There we go. You can click New or hover over New and then click whatever you want, which in this case would be a text document. You can also use Control-N because we are in the writer landscape, so it will automatically know, okay, you want a new writer file. You can also click Open, which will open your file folder, and that will allow you to go and find a previous writer document if it's not in one of your previously used, or if you want to open a different document as a writer document. So let's see. We are also going to talk about saving. So down here is the Save button, or if you use Control-S, it just saves the file as its normal name. So at the top here, it's LibreOffice Writer Video Example ODT. But if I click Save As, it will pop up this window here, and it will allow me to rename this and save it to here or any other place on my PC. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about here is printing. So down at the bottom here, there is this print button, or you can use Control-P, and that will allow you to print it to whatever computer you have connected, or whatever printer you have connected to your computer. But you can also use Microsoft Print to PDF. But this is also of note. You can use Export As and click Export as PDF or as EPUB, whichever one you want. This is another way to do this, especially if you don't have a Microsoft Print to PDF option. Say you have a Mac OS or a Linux device. This is a great option. Okay, so next we're going to talk about formatting. And this is my beautiful, beautiful, not formatted at all, CV. Now, right here is my name, as we can see. There are plenty of things that we can do. So the first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about bolding something, which is this button up at the top here, or if you use Control-B, it makes that bold. And you can just select this again and click the button again, and it will unbold that for you. So say you have a bunch of text that you've copy-pasted in, you can remove that bold by just clicking Control-B once, and then doing it again to unbold it so that everything is back to its uniform, not bolded state. This works for everything else. Now next there is the italicize option, which is Control-I, and if you do that, it italicizes that text, as you can see. And you click that again, and it italicizes it. And then there's the underline option, which is Control-U. Or you can click this button, and it underlines that for you. I'm going to zoom in and make that just a wee bit bigger. There we go. So, click that again. Now, LibreOffice Writer has one very awesome feature that many other Word writer tools of sorts do not have, and that is you can actually click this little down arrow next to the U for underline, and you can change which kind of underline it is. So while you're proofreading a paper, or maybe you want to add some pizzazz to your CV, this is a good option because you're able to change it to be something that's not typically conventional. I'll just change that back to without. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to center this because that is the most ideal. It feels weird to have it all be left aligned. So I have selected my name, and then up at the top here in the ribbon, there is an Align Left button, which is Control-L, and that is currently what it is. It automatically selects Control-L or Left Align. There is Control E, which is align center. Now that is what we want, so we can also click this button up at the top here, or use Control E, which centers that beautifully. Or we can align right, which is Control R. And as you can see, it right aligns that. But I don't use the right align as much, so to each their own. And then there is Justify, which if you click Justified, it looks like it's left aligned, but if you add more text throughout the line, it will actually evenly space out the letters so that it is relatively the same size for each paragraph, as you can see by this like little lines icon here. It will make that the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to click Align Center or Control E, and then that is where that sits. Now, we can also change the font size and the font type. So up at the top here, we can change the font. And maybe I want Times New Roman. That is a very common font, but there are a bunch of other ones. I can just type in that name and click on that, and it changes that font. You can see that it's very different down here. Now, I also want to change the font size. So what I can do is I can click this little drop-down arrow here and select the font size. So in this case, I want 14-point font because that makes that slightly larger and more visible. Now, I'm also going to bold this text just because, again, I want this to stand out at me. I want this to be like, oh, I actually want to look at this. So that is what I'm going to do. Typically for different styles, like style guides, if you're using APA or MLA, you will want a certain font and a certain font size. I am used to using Times New Roman and 12-point font because I'm used to APA format, but it varies. If you want to abide by a style guide, you just type in whatever the style name you want. So, for example, APA and then style guide, and usually something will accumulate on the internet, and you're able to follow that specific outline of, okay, you want your font to be Times New Roman, you want your font size to be 12, and then the formatting of the piece of paper itself. Let's see. Next, we want to center this line here. That's just because it will look nicer and be a lot cleaner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to again click this Align Center button up at the top here, and it will have populated that into the middle. Now, I quite like my font here. I want to copy this exact formatting without having to readjust it so that I can put it here into education and into skills. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on this here, and I'm going to click this little clone formatting button up at the top here. Now that it has like a little light gray box outlining it, that means it's ready. There's also this little paint bucket icon on my cursor. So what I can do is I can select education, and it centers it. Now I don't quite want it centered, I want it left aligned, so I'm going to again click this button up at the top. And then I want to copy this formatting by clicking the clone formatting button so that I can copy this down to skills. Now we have our two headers, and they look amazing. The next thing that we are wanting to focus on is the line spacing. Now this is single space, or should be. It feels kind of cramped, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click set line spacing up at the top here. There's a little drop down, and I'm going to click 1.15, and there we go. Now it's a little more spread out. You can set your font spacing to whatever you want it to be on your CV. I prefer 1.15 as it makes it a little bit easier to read, but if you're wanting more space, you can do 1 point font, and from there you can utilize that as is. You can also use 2-point font, if I can, here we go, otherwise known as double space. This is common for APA and MLA, and as well as many other writing styles, as it makes a paper really easy to read. As you can see here, it breaks things down very nicely and allows for a lot of different space. So what we're going to do is we're going to click line spacing 1.15, and we're going to continue on. Now, this is paragraph spacing. We don't want to change this too much, but what it does is, for example, here, there is a nice little break. There's the paragraph marker here. And this is largely so that you can see what goes on. So what I want to do is I'm going to increase paragraph spacing, and you can see that they split further and further apart. It doesn't change the spacing of the entire paper, it only changes the spacing in between paragraphs here. And what you can do is you can click decrease paragraph spacing, 1, 2, 3, and it's back to its normal form. So that is a useful tool, but typically you will not be using it much unless you're wanting to format something nicely and want that space. Now, I did not touch on this earlier, and I mean to. What you can do is you can also change the font color. So up at the top here, there's this little drop down on this little A, and you can change the font color to, let's say, red. It changes my name to red. I don't particularly love that, so I'm going to undo with this undo arrow up the top here, and it changes that back. I can also highlight things with this character highlighting button. And so again, if I click red, it highlights my name in red, but this time it changes the font to white. That is just because the font differences, it depends on the color, because if it's a light color, it'll be black. If it's a darker color or more vivid color, it will be white, just so that there is the ease of reading it. Now again, I'm going to click this undo arrow up at the top here. You can click redo attributes if you want to like put the action back, as you can see, but I don't want to, so I'm going to keep that undone. Alrighty, let's see. Next, I'm just going to show you how to toggle this little button here. The show paragraph marker button is up top here. It is labeled toggle formatting markers, but for Google Sheets, or, my mistake, Google Docs or Microsoft Word, it is usually show paragraph markers. This is useful when you want to see where a paragraph ends, and is great for an example on the page. It also is showing you these arrows because this is an enter key. So now let's see. Okay, so this is just changing the alignment. My mistake. I was like, I don't quite know what that did, but it is okay. So next, there is the font here that I actually believe is in Liberation Serif still. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to change this to Times New Roman. Now, I don't automatically put Times New Roman at the top because I had already previously used it. So if you ever think you're going to go back to a similar font, just check the top first before you type it in, because it may be there. And again, I'm going to copy the formatting to both things here. And it did not center because that is not centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align center again. And now everything is in Times New Roman font, including this. Good. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to headers and footers really quickly. So what you're going to do is up at the top here, you're going to click Format. My mistake. Okay, yeah, my mistake. It varies between where you are, like which tool you're using. I am more familiar with Microsoft Word, and so it is more familiar to that. What you're going to do is you're going to click on Insert. It'll pop up this whole button here. What you can do is you can click Footnote and Endnote if you want to add one of those, or if you want to click a header and footer, and that is what we're going to go to. You can click Header, and then you can click Default Page Style, and it adds a header, but I'm going to actually undo that because there's already a header here, as you can see, but if you click this little plus button, it adds another one. And you can insert a page number like that, and it's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this, go back to Insert, and you can also click Page Number here, and you're allowed to pick where. So in this case, I want it to be at the top of the page, and I want it to be left. That is usually what I do, and you can also change the numbers that it has for the page number. So you can also import different options. I'm not going to go into that today, but you can import different options for text, and that will allow you to have different selections. Now, it'll be left aligned up at the top here, and as you can see, there's a page number, and if I want, I can click Insert Page Break, and that will add a second page for me, and again, you can see that that number has been updated. So, if you can also add this on footer, and you can add a footer using this. Same thing, super easy and very helpful. You can also differentiate a running head or page numbers for a title page or a cover page. This is great for, again, following APA or MLA style guides, and is very useful. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to add a photograph into the document here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple more entries down here just so that I can add one and have it be kind of distinct. You can see here there is 3 paragraph breaks, and I can click this button, and I'm going to see, do I have an image on my computer? That is the question. I may not have an image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to pictures. Yeah, we'll use a photo of me. So, is massive, as you can see. What you can do is that, because the host decided it wants to take up an entire page, what you can do is you can resize it using these arrows. There we go, much better. Other than it has now distorted me, so we're going to put that back really quick, and we're going to try again. Just make sure to grab by the corners so that you can shrink down your photo. Maybe you want a photo up in the top here of you so that people know what you look like on your CV. This is more common for a resume, I guess, but it still could be applicable here. Now, you can right-click on this picture and you can click Crop, Edit with External Tool, Replace, Compress, or Protect. You can protect its position or its size. Compressing it essentially means that it makes it a smaller quality and less large within your document. This is great if you have multiple different pictures in a document and you don't want your document to be absolutely massive. Now, I'm going to remove this picture because I don't need this here. The next thing I'm going to do, apparently this needs removed too. Never mind. I can't select this orange dot for some reason, but I'm not quite sure why it's there. It might have been because of the picture. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a table. Now, we can see that all of this information here is very useful, and it wants to be in the format of a table, but I believe that it would be, this looks a lot more messy than it would with a table. So what you can do is you can click up at the top here, insert, oh, and you can also add pictures this way as well. I'm more used to adding an image here. So you can click insert, and I believe, I may be mistaken, I am mistaken. Again, this is the difference between Microsoft Word and LibreOffice, is that things are slightly different. There is a insert table button here as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this button, and we can see that we have 3 fields, and then 3 fields. So what we're going to do is we want a 3 by 3, and that's great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to type in technical languages, and I have lost where my cursor is. There it is. Soft skills. And then we're going to add intermediate Python programming, German, teamwork, intermediate Java programming, Spanish, communication. Now you can see that we have this beautiful table here. I'm going to remove this information now since we want this information to be right here. So this doesn't look exactly like it looked before. Before there were no borders. Now what we can do is up here at the top, or just wherever, you can select the entire thing, and then down here there is a borders button. Now you can click your options here, and in this case we're going to click no borders, and that makes it much nicer. And you can still see that there are paragraph marks because the cells still do exist. They just now are more formatted into the proper form and less klutzy and disfigured that they were with the enters. And it is easier to track what information goes where based off of the paragraph marks versus trying to update information within my previous table where I couldn't without having to adjust the spacing manually. This keeps it much easier and looks a lot more clean. You can also add like borders to specific parts of it. And you can also change the type of border. So here, we will add that borders back for just this example, and we're going to select all borders. And we can see that that changes that. Oh, you can select the margins and change them, and that's what I had accidentally done. But we want to click this drop down arrow, and you can change the border style to whatever you want. So in this case, maybe dashed. I don't love the look of this, but it is good for certain things. Maybe you're creating a little tracker and you want a dashed border. It looks great for that for those types of things. But for this, we want it to be more clean and more professional. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click undo, and it's back to this beautiful outline here. Now, we can see that this has been in a red underline, and my last name has been in a red underline. And if you right click on my last name, actually, it gives you a whole bunch of different options for spelling of my name because it knows that it's not a conventional English word. I'm going to actually click ignore, and that actually fixes that so that when I type my name again, it will still be wrong. And I can click ignore all, and that will mean that when I type my name again, it doesn't highlight it that time. that is great. We love when that happens, but you need to be very careful when you're using that functionality because it may mean that you accidentally will miss typos because you've accepted it once. Now, what you can also do is up at the top here, you can click check spelling or F7, and it will ask to continue checking at the beginning of document. You'll want to click yes. So Jane Doe is already flagged, but you're going to ignore this once. And we can also correct it by just changing it. And you can see that it actually changed it to its first suggestion. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to undo that. And then next we have degree, which has been underlined this entire time. And what you can see up at the top here, there's a whole bunch of different options, but here we go. I have broken it on accident, my bad. We're going to go back through here. We're going to ignore once on that, and then we're going to click degree, and we're going to click correct, and that fixes it, and then it says the spell check is complete. Now you can click close, and if you saw briefly, you can choose your text language. So if you, for example, are trying to type in Spanish, and it is not reading your words as functionally correct, you are able to go through and change that language so that it can check the words in Spanish. It makes more sense. You can also add different languages again, but that takes a little bit more work and a lot more time and effort to put in. Alright, the next thing that we're going to talk about is adding bullet points. So I'm actually going to copy this. And how you can do that really quick is just clicking copy up at the top here, which is Control-C, and then paste up at the top here, which is Control-V. You can also use cut, which just essentially if I cut this, it removes it, and then I can paste it again. And it will have been removed from its original spot, which, again, is still the same space, but that is just for if you're trying to move large chunks of text around, or even small chunks of text around without having to rewrite everything. So the last few things that I kind of want to discuss are, okay, here we go. The last things I want to discuss are adding bullet points. So you can see here that there is a whole section of stuff that I didn't talk about a second ago, and that's because these are bullet points. So maybe I want a list. Maybe I want to add a list of skills. Again, I already have a list here, but maybe I don't want it in that form. I prefer the original form, but this also works. You can add German, Spanish, teamwork, communication, and you can see that it adds those bullet points. This is great, and I love this for different formatting, but it also can be different. So maybe I don't want it to be these bullet points. Maybe if I select these, I can change the type of bullet points. So maybe I want them to be triangles. This is a great drop-down menu option. Many other writing tools use this, but LibreOffice provides many options and is often the most optimal for different customization. Maybe I want my bullet points to be numbered or lettered. So this just means that I can track it and see what the differences are. And I can also customize and create my own bullet points of sorts. So if I click 1, 2, and 3, you can see that it instantly applies that. Now, you can also click customize and you can change your own outline format. So maybe I have all of these in Roman numerals, and then maybe I want that to be like different languages. This actually might be a better example. Using it like that, it is another way that you can do that, and it makes it more easy to read and less of a struggle for many to read. Now, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm just checking to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I know that LibreOffice does not do this functionality, but it is helpful for others. The red underline when spell check exists, like when there's a spelling error, is because something is spelled wrong. But if it is ever underlined in blue, it is often a grammatical error, meaning you missed a comma, maybe you have duplicate words, etc. So it is good to be conscious of that and be careful when you are making your spell check changes, because it will not register what happens and what doesn't. The other thing I want to talk about really quick is strike through. Now this is another option up at the top here. And maybe I don't want my education up here. Maybe I'm just going to get rid of that. This is great if you're wanting to work kind of collaboratively. There is a collaboration tool of sorts as well. I'm not as familiar with that. But if you want to suggest changes to somebody and then send it back as a like adjusted form with like a strike through, this is a great use for it. Now, maybe you are also like a math major. This would be something very helpful for a math major, is E equals MC, and then I want to add squared. Now, I could always type it out the way that most people do, where it's that. Or, my apologies, you can delete this, and you can click superscript, and then click 2, and you can see that it is now in the superscript form. Now, you can also click subscript, and type in 2, and it puts that at the bottom there. This is, again, great if you're typing out math problems, or if you're doing some sort of proofs, and you want to have that documented, as well as add notes. I don't particularly use this function that much, but it can be helpful. Now, let's see. Alrighty, that is the end of my class. Thank you so much for listening, and please comment any questions that you have. They can always be answered, and I'm happy to help. Thank you so much. Goodbye.